after I got involved with King County, one of the things that came up at the time I was still president of the Doring Group was police issues. There were two events in particular that were shocking. Well, one thing I had been asked to do when I was co-chair of CMEC was to interview Patrick Fitzsimons, who was Charles Royer's choice for chief of police. He was from the New York City Police Department. He had been selected and his nomination made to the city council. But he wanted to hear the gay community's review. So I used techniques we'd used in CMEC, assembled a group of about 16 leaders of the gay and lesbian community at a meeting where I said, our challenge is to come up with questions for this man, and we'll do this by a process of brainstorming followed by ranking the questions, each of us independently ranking them in terms of what we think is their importance to the community. And then we'll do the math, and then those will be the order in which the questions will be asked. And as much time permits, we will ask all of the questions if we can. And then people were agreeable with that. We held that interview. No one found a reason to really object to the man. No one really found a reason for us to get behind him and give great, praise. So I just said, each of you are free to write to members of the council as they consider him for this position, or to the mayor based upon this discussion, and told Mayor Royer we had done our work, and that seemed satisfactory. But later, the Brass Door was a very popular bar on Capitol Hill at Pike and Broadway, or Pike and Harvard Street, starting in 1978. And one night, the bouncer was stabbed in front of the bar and died. And there was another person, a man named Lowell Barger, who I think is still in the community, who was given to going to visit our parks for social reasons as well as aesthetics reasons. And he did a little newsletter about the parks and kind of kept people apprised of which parks were being paid attention to by the authorities or by gangs or whatever, which ones seemed to have stories of danger and which ones didn't. And that was a valuable thing to the people who picked up that news.
How many people would pick up that news?
It's hard to say. They would be distributed through the bars, so a few hundred at least would go out, copies of that. And it may not reach some of the people who would go to the parks at the time, because a lot of people who go to the parks would be closeted men who maybe are married and have regular, normal heterosexual lives, and yet are seeking some outlet for their sexuality that involves people of the same sex, and they find those opportunities in public places where anonymity is the rule. And that was certainly the case. For a time, I was very concerned about venereal disease education, because I felt that the establishment was quite wrong-headed about it. When I still lived in Ellensburg, I wrote a letter to Harper's Weekly, which had published a little article by a man who was a researcher, not a researcher, but a contacts checker in a venereal disease agency somewhere. And he was talking about what an interesting job he had as a kind of detective about venereal diseases and tracking the sources and so forth. And I wrote and said, I think it would be better if you spent more time giving shots and letting people know that there is a non-judgmental way to get treatment and tell people what the symptoms of venereal diseases are, than to go tracking down people and saying, you had sex with so-and-so and you may have given them or gotten exposed to this. And speaking to people who are deeply closeted and very fearful of you. So that the best way really to reduce venereal disease, bring it way down, would be more treatment, more education about it, less shaming, and the shaming just goes with the closet, not with what you're trying to do, but with the closet. And I wrote to officials here in Seattle as well when there were discussions of that in 1980, say. And one time I even went to a convention of sorts, not a convention, but a retreat of sorts for VD workers in Seattle, and went with a lesbian woman, and she spoke to women's issues and I spoke to gay men's issues, and I challenged them. I said, I think that you need to reconsider what you're doing. You need to have anonymous, non-judgmental outlets for treatment. You need to have education to people. But if you threaten people who are in the closet and who are already fearful of exposure to knowledge of their homosexual activity, they will run away from you, and they will carry those microbes with them, and they will still pass them on and pass them on and pass them on. And that's something that I think is still true, in as much as they contact trace. Yes, that's useful and it's important and it's helpful, but that's something that you should volunteer to help someone do, not require of them and pressure them and so forth, and do a lot of, background checks and what have you. It's very threatening stuff.
Yeah, it's strange when you want to take the shame out of it, the negative reaction you get from the people. It's like they don't see it that way because they're not closeted, or they're not.
Yes,
they can't see it.
They don't understand the closet, and they don't understand that the closet isn't just the gay activist issue. I mean, we've been through the closet, and some of us still have the closet in some respects. I mean, throughout my father's life, I never talked to him about gay rights work that I was deeply involved with here. And, so thanks to Facebook, I'm totally out of the closet with all my family. But
Interesting.
But that's because it's possible now to get to do that. It's impossible for me to hide my passions in terms of Facebook and what you post. And I'm not posting sexual stuff, I'm posting political stuff, but it's still...
Why the tie? Constantly this tie with gay equals sex. You know what I mean? You post something political, and then, like
Yes.
you said before, the cop he brought out this.
Yes, I know.
What is that? What have you found over the years?
All right, in the 10 minutes, let's talk about what happened after those two. Lowell Barger was beaten up in Kinnear Park by a gang.
Where's Kinnear Park?
Queen Anne, and he was very nearly killed by that. And news of that shocked Mayor Royer, both those events, and he asked the chief of police to do something about getting the gay community and the police together, because it was a safety issue that we were not communicating well with one another, that there was this hostility between us. And so a committee was formed in the Crime Prevention Division under Noreen Skagen, who was Assistant Chief of Police. And I volunteered for that committee and became very active in it. And we produced, ultimately, in 4 years' time, after 4 years of discussions and hard discussions about the hostility and the basis for it between gays and lesbians and the police, and talked about the importance of safety and the importance of crime reporting and the importance of police doing their job and the importance of having internal investigations handle police misconduct and having the community adopt new attitudes about them. We produced a brochure called Stop Assaults on Gay People, the Crime Prevention Guide. And it was the first time the Seattle Police Department logo appeared on something directed to the gay community as a public service to help gay people be wiser if in their being out in the community. We had in particular in mind the people who cruised parks, because we knew they put themselves at risk by going into dark areas at night to find sexual contact, and that risks, yes, arrest for the crime of public sex, but it also risks a lot of other things. It risks victimization by gangs or criminals and so forth. So we had things like and we also had people who would disappear after going home with someone from a bar or be found murdered in their apartment, and people didn't know who they saw last, So we had things like, when you leave with someone, tell the bartender who you're going home with. Tell somebody. Make sure someone is aware. If you're going out into a public place like a park, have a buddy system. Take a rape whistle with you. When trouble comes, go for the lighted area. Get out of the dark. Make noise. Noise is the enemy of crime. When the police are summoned, yeah, maybe you find they take too long getting there. Maybe you find they're snotty towards you. Whatever, but for heaven's sakes, use them for what they're supposed to be doing, protecting you from crime. Give a crime report. Report crimes. Crimes don't exist. They didn't happen if they're not reported. they don't know to allocate resources to this or that area or this or that area of emphasis because people aren't reporting those crimes happening. Still today, that's happening. And when I was assaulted in a strong arm robbery outside of the Axle Rock, now the Rebar, one night, I left the bar. I had participated in this brochure. I left the bar. I was stopped by these guys who said they were going to stab me if I didn't get my money. And I handed over the money, and I saw an opportunity to run, and I ran into a friend who gave me a ride from there. But I had been stupid. I went out by myself. I was tipsy. I was heading home. I was thinking more of the dancing I'd just done and not at all about my surroundings. I violated everything in the brochure. I thought, oh, God, this was something. I even wrote a piece about it. Not sure whether it was one I put into the SGN or not, but it's something I did write up. And it was and that's why I was still at that meeting where I saw you the other night at the police council, advisory council, because I wanted to talk about the work we did in 80 to 84. And we gave, one night a month to that for 4 years. And they were hard meetings. But I was really proud of that brochure, even though only 5,000 copies were ever produced and distributed in the bars. It was something to get the word out. It was something to get the police department involved in it. It was something to have expressed those thoughts and those ideas.
And it's never stopped, right? Was there ever a point after that it was like they just stopped with the gay community? Because it seems to me that was a kickoff to...
I'm not sure, because I know that for myself, when Norm Rice became mayor, and I got very involved with Norm Rice back in 1985, 78 when he was elected for council in the first time, but I asked to be on his search committee for chief of police, the committee that did not forward Norm Stamper's name, but Norm Stamper was my champion. I was champion for him. He was really wonderful, I thought, and so did several other members of the committee. And we wrote letters independently to the mayor saying he should look at Norm Stamper. The police were resistant to him, even though he had a good record as a policeman with street cred and so forth, as well as his intellect and what have you. They still were very suspicious of him as a leader. They didn't feel that the Good Old Boy Network could really support that. And the mayor did consider him and did appoint him as his chief, and he did a fine job in the city. And up till WTO was the reason he had ended up leaving the job. But he was, so I was involved in that search committee.